Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Abhijit show. We are back live, and it's good to be back on this live stream with you all. So let us see who all is there with us tonight. As you would know, I hope that today is uh, it's a live chat show, which means I'm going to be taking all the questions from the live chat, nothing from the comments. The comments episode will be tomorrow. So this is your opportunity to ask your best questions, and I will try and pick as many of them as possible. So let's see who all is there on the live stream. I can see Varad Desai, Yogesh, Yuvraj, Shushrut, Leo Messi, Herbie on Wheels, Shubhayu, Pahadi Server, Saurabh Jat, Amisha, Sagnik, Narayan, Yesterday Alpha, Harish, Anime Art, Pradeep, Jay, Asmenor, VK, Ibo, Hatela, Raja Kumar, Fatty Just Ate, Vladimirovich Putin, Avinash Mishra, Apratihat Singh, Civilizationist, Akash, Dr. A. Debashish, Twilight, Arman Sharma, Abhishek, Chirag, Vichitra Ladka, Lord Shiva, Shashank Hegde, Overlord, Prasanna, Rahul, Exasperated Farago, Rishi, Eril, Jasman Raj Singh, Krishan 63, Karan Nalawa, GK, Lage Raho Online, Ankan, Shrikant, Liger, Sharma is Big, Mani Sundar, The Dragon Emperor, Dungar Singh Chauhan, O Lotus, Shivam Singh, Adarsh, Giga, Chadwa, Namit, Anthalin Paul, Durga M, Om Bekerikar, Rama, Bakasur, Sagar, Nilesh, Bhavyadeep, Joy DSP, Chat DSP, Saurabh Badoria, Totan, Bimla, Matteo Perez, Dhruba Jyoti, XYZ, Tushar Kasana, Arnab Singh, Piyush Jaiswal, Feminist Slayer, Chetan Aradhya, and lots of people. Thank you so much, everybody, for being on the live chat and and being on the live stream. I really appreciate it. Let's see some more people. Dr. Jaishankar, Supremacy, Harish, Anime Art, Abhinav, Achal Shahi, Suhan, Vyom, Manohar, Adya Prakash Das, Ketan Wankhede, Mevan Shwa, Lingdo, and everybody else. So great to be with you all tonight. So let's take the questions. Let's begin with questions from the live stream. Let's see, from the live chat. So go ahead and start asking your questions, and I'll take as many as possible. GoDB says global warming, North Sea route opens. Will Indian influence in Indian Ocean be affected? Okay, so we're talking about global warming and the North Sea route. So what are we talking about? We have to look at the map, obviously, to understand this. The map has to be brought into the picture. Where's the map? Here's the map. Here's a map. So we're talking about global warming, North Sea route open. So we're talking about the northern, around the North Pole. So the North Pole is somewhere over here, as you can see. The globe is rotating around the north-south pole axis. North Pole is somewhere here, and typically this Arctic Ocean is mostly frozen for much of the year, if not the entire year. Definitely 7-8 months a year, at least it is frozen because of the cold temperatures. But now with global warming, this sea will be open and not frozen for certain times of the year. And the number of days it is not frozen will increase, which means that there will be trade routes opening up over here, and you will be people will be able to exploit the resources that are available in this region more effectively than before. So what does this mean for India? Does it mean that India's influence in the Indian Ocean be affected? No, it will not be affected, because see, India is over here. The northern route, the northern sea, the Arctic Ocean is over here. So it's a huge distance, and how on earth will it possibly affect India's ability to influence the Indian Ocean? So clearly there's no connection between these two things. Obviously India would also like to participate. See, if you look at which country uh, is over here, it's obviously Russia. So much of the coastline of the Arctic Ocean is it's Russian territory, and Russia's exclusive economic zone, and Russia's zone of influence. And Russia and India have a good relationship. The Russians have come out with with a modified version of their foreign policy, which they have officially announced, which says that Russia would like to cooperate deeply with China and India going forward. So these are the two major nations that it will be cooperating with extensively. So I'm sure India can also participate in the trading activity and whatever else resource, uh, looking at the resources and all that in the North Sea region, in the Arctic Ocean region. So it will help India definitely with Russia's cooperation, but it will not reduce or affect India's influence in the Indian Ocean region in any significant way whatsoever. All right, so that's the first question that we have taken. Right, let's see other questions. Let us see. Tell us something about the Prakrit language, says Ritesh Raj. Was it a sister language of Sanskrit? Is it still spoken? No, no, no. I know there are lots of YouTubers and all and people who claim that Prakrit came before Sanskrit, which is which is risible. It is funny. I mean, it's not even funny. Prakrit is it was not a single language. First of all, Prakrit. It was a bunch of languages. The Prakrits. All right. The oldest language that we know of in the history of humanity is Vedic or possibly pre-Vedic Sanskrit. Uh, Linguists talk about a hypothetical Proto-Indo-European language. Well, that language, so that's what you will find in all books about linguistics, in all history textbooks which reference linguistics, in research papers and articles. The truth is that the oldest language that we know of is Vedic Sanskrit. And obviously, that language would have evolved out of something else, which would not be Proto Indo European, it would be pre Vedic Sanskrit. That's what it is. So, and these Prakrit languages, they emerged later, sometime in the first millennium BC. And it's very likely that, in the post Vedic age and before the first millennium BC, there was this time period, the great Mahajanapada era and all that, in which lots of different languages would have been spoken, which would have emerged out of Sanskrit. Upper branch languages. These were the Prakrits, and the Prakrits were spoken until the first millennium AD and maybe even slightly later. So we had Maharashtri Prakrit, we had the old Gurjari language, which is the ancestor of the Gujarati and Rajasthani languages, and so much more. You had the various Magadhi languages. Every single language that exists in India today is a descendant of the older Prakrit languages, and the Prakrits, they all emerged out of Sanskrit. So it was not a sister language of Sanskrit or any such thing. It was a descendant language of Sanskrit. It emerged out of the various corruptions that Sanskrit underwent. Languages evolve. Languages change. People who live in different parts of the world, they will eventually, their languages evolve. So if you look at the Persian language, the old Persian language that was spoken during the Achaemenid period, the first millennium BC, that itself you could regard it as a Prakrit language because it emerged out of Sanskrit. So it was significantly closely related to Sanskrit. You could actually, if you read the inscriptions that are written in the cuneiform script, but which are in the old Persian language, they sound very much like Sanskrit with certain pronunciations changed, and some words here and there have been changed, and some grammar is kind of modified. But overall, if you understand Sanskrit or even Hindi, you will understand significant portions of what was written uh, at the time. So the Prakrit languages are daughter languages of Sanskrit, not sister languages. There are lots of YouTubers who these days spread this propaganda that Prakrit came before Sanskrit, Buddhism came before Hinduism, all this nonsense. Please don't pay attention to this nonsense. Please don't do that. All right. Okay. And once again, lots of questions. I saw a question, but it disappeared. Is there a chance that Shinzo Abe's assassination had involvement of the US because Mr. Abe wanted Japan to have an independent foreign policy? The assassin did not have a reasonable reason also. Listen, do we have any evidence of this or that or whatever? We have no evidence. The assassin, I mean, did anybody interview the assassin? No, he was taken into custody by the Japanese government, and then we have no idea what's happened with him. So we don't know what his real motives were. He was definitely an ex-army or ex-military person who well did this. So we don't really know what his motives were. He may perhaps have stated certain motives, but the real motives we don't really know. So without evidence, we cannot say who was behind this. Possibilities are open. Many possibilities are open. But if you speculate and make a claim without any evidence, well, you're not going to be taken seriously. So is there a chance? A chance? Well, there are chances of lots of things. There is a small amount of probability that if you if probability is 100%, then you take out various slices and lots of different options are there, but we don't know which is the truth in the absence of any actual evidence, disclosed evidence. So I don't know who was behind it. Is there a possibility that somebody or the other was involved? The possibility is there, but we don't have conclusive evidence of that, and therefore, yeah, can't say anything. Shri Joseph Stalin says Bhojpuri is superior to Sanskrit. All right, sir. uh, all right. Utkarsh says, what's your take on Russia's new foreign policy? So the Russian foreign policy was recently unveiled, and it's a long, long document. I'll not put it on the screen because I don't have it open anywhere. But yeah, so the Russian foreign ministry has come up with a modified, updated version of their foreign policy just yesterday or day before yesterday, and there's a lot. It's a very lengthy document. It will take you at least 10 minutes or so, I would say, if you want to read it thoroughly, properly. But what's interesting is that they are focusing on two major nations, uh, focusing as in cooperation. So these two major nations are are China and India. So the Russians have said, they say that they have a very privileged and excellent relationship with India, and similar with China, and they're going to be focusing a lot on these two nations to cooperate from the perspective of the mutual national interest and mutual benefit. So and obviously they speak about the US and the fact that the US seeks to destroy and defeat Russia strategically and on those things. So I have not studied it in great detail, but these things stood out to me straight away. So it's clear that the Russians would like to create a new revised world order that is no longer completely led by the US. The focus is definitely on establishing, you could say, a parallel system of the international order. So you're going to have a bifurcation of the international order. On the one hand, you have the so-called rules-based world order of the United States. On the other hand, we're going to have a different system that's going to be led by Russia, India, China, and where lots of other nations are interested. You have the BRICS uh, group of nations. That's 5 nations, including Russia, India, China, South Africa, and uh, Brazil as well. Other nations are have expressed their desire to join it. Major nations like Saudi Arabia, which is one of the major oil producers, and Mexico, and lots of other nations want to join BRICS. Indonesia, also various African nations. So BRICS looks like it's set to expand. So we're gonna see lots of changes now, and Russia's foreign policy is calibrated to make these things happen. So it's clear that there's a big change, a big upheaval that's currently happening in real time in the global world order, and Russia's new foreign policy is a reflection of that. So they are stating certain things explicitly, that they will cooperate with India and China, and they are also talking about certain things have to be read between the lines. So that's my first reaction to the Russian foreign policy. Maybe I should look into it in great detail and perhaps make a separate video about that. But yeah, that's what it is. So India is playing a kind of privileged role in this entire matter. It is significantly it is cooperating in a significant manner with the Western Bloc, with the US and NATO and EU nations. India has a good relationship with these nations. Obviously, the US has not been happy about India's refusal to play along with their sanctions on Russia. But apart from that, India has an excellent relationship with reasonably good relationship with the West. India also is a part of BRICS, so it has a good relationship with the East as well. A privileged relationship with Russia, a not good relationship with China, but things could possibly improve, possibly depending on how Mr. Xi Jinping goes about things. His nation is also under a lot of stress and strain right now, a lot of pressure. Things are not going as per the way they had expected. So India is playing a very important and interesting role. India is not taking one side or the other, and India could end up being the bridge between the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. And India could be the nation that nobody really is afraid of, because India doesn't have any expansionist hegemonic ambitions, and it's a nation that everybody can essentially trust. So India could eventually, in the next 20 years, emerge as the global diplomatic center of the world. Maybe we should relocate the United Nations to India or something like that. So that's what's happening. Time will tell us how it goes, but that's the deal, and that's what I think of the Russian foreign policy for now. Uh, Will I be watching WrestleMania tomorrow? No, I don't watch WrestleMania anymore. I used to watch it when I was a teenager, when I was a kid. These days I watch UFC, MMA, mixed martial arts. That's much more real. WrestleMania is all scripted, the WWE, it's all scripted. It's world wrestling entertainment. It's not real fighting. Obviously, the injuries are real. People do get injured, the wrestlers and all. But overall, it's scripted. It's more about entertainment. The UFC, MMA is about actual fighting, and you can see it. I mean, you can tell when you see it. So these days I'm more into MMA. I'm more into the UFC. I watch it whenever I can find the time to watch it. I prefer watching it live, but you can also watch rewatch recorded fights and all that. So yeah, I will not be watching the WWE, but I do try and catch whenever I can the UFC and Bellator as well. If it's these days, it's not available in India, but we can look for it if it's there. Rajat says, how will chat GPT, like generative AI, affect our lives and most importantly, our jobs? How is the future going to be like? Generative AI is completely transforming the world right now. In the past, people had to hire research assistants. Professors would make their students slave for them, do all the donkey work, all the boring work, and then they would take all that together and write their books or their research papers or whatever. Now you don't need that. You have a virtual assistant that you can, well, all you have to do is pay $20 a month. I mean, chat gpt 3.5 is completely free, and chat gpt 4 is, I think, $20 a month. You also have Google Bard, you also have Bing AI. Well, Bing and chat gpt are essentially the same thing, but they behave in different ways. They are different flavors of the same thing. You also have things like stable diffusion and dal e, and there's this thing on Discord which is all about generating images based on various prompts. So you can create any kind of artwork in anybody's style nowadays. There was an issue with the fingers. It would make fingers look weird in the past. I think that is being addressed right now. So soon you will have extremely realistic images that the AI can spit out at a moment's notice. I'm sure obviously that also will cost some money, but it's not a whole lot of money. It's not a lot of money. It's not unaffordable for most people. Not for students. Obviously, students cannot spend that kind of money. But once you have a job and all, you can set aside a bit of money if you are so inclined. So uh, so it's going to put artists out of business, but you can tell sometimes, these days you can still tell what kind of art is AI generated. But as newer and better, more powerful iterations of these AIs come out, the art is going to be indistinguishable from reality, from let's say a photographic image or the art created by an artist. So eventually you're going to be able to create any kind of image that you want, any image that you want. These days on Twitter, you had all these fake AI images coming out of Donald Trump being arrested, and the Pope wearing some weird white uh, jacket or something like that, and lots of images of Elon Musk keep coming out. So you can generate just about anything. It looks incredibly realistic, and in the next year or two it's going to look indistinguishable from reality. So it's going to put photographers out of business. It's going to put artists out of business. It's going to put graphic artists and painters out of business for sure. I don't know how those professions will keep up with the advances in AI. Um, it's gonna essentially totally make the education system irrelevant. You can now get a complete education just from AI, and you can make the AI, the generative AI, like Bing or Chat GPT, act as a tutor, and the tutoring and the education you can receive from that is far superior to anything most professors can offer you. So you can gain, you know a master's degree level of knowledge, even PhD level knowledge, from this already. $20 a month, that's it. It's incredibly cheap. Why would you spend, like, I don't know how much it costs one semester in the US. Indians spend a huge amount of money to go to the US. All that they are seeking is either go and migrate to the West or come back with a degree from a US university. Well, all of these degrees are already becoming worthless. So it's transforming a lot of things. It's going to transform the creative sectors. When you take AI and 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 you combine then with that with robotics, it's going to put a lot of assembly line workers and all these workers out of business. So it's going to totally transform the world in the next 6 months to the next 10 years. It's going to be totally transformed, the entire world. And so it's lots of professions will become redundant. Lots of people will lose jobs. Thus far, I don't see anybody has lost their jobs thus far, but we are in the infancy of the AI revolution. you know and people have written books about AI and all that, but so some of these very celebrated books have totally failed to anticipate the rise of the chatbots. So I'm not talking about anybody in specific. I'm not trying to create any controversy here, but that's the thing. So it's going to totally transform the world from the job perspective and the career and profession perspective. It's also going to transform the way geopolitics works. There are nations that are really investing in AI from a military and geopolitical perspective, and those developments are not going to be visible to anybody. That is all happening behind closed doors. So it's going to totally transform the world in the next 5 to 10 years. Right now, like I said, nobody has lost their jobs thus far as we can see. Nobody has come out on social media complaining, I lost my job because of AI. It's not happened thus far. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So programmers, like I missed that. Programmers will no longer be needed. I mean, AI already spits out any kind of code you want. It can spit out Python code. It can spit out COBOL code, for God's sakes. COBOL. It's an almost legacy language from the 1960s. COBOL is still very important because it runs the mainframes that are behind lots of legacy systems, credit card systems and whatnot. It's still a very big deal. If you are a COBOL programmer, it's a very lucrative uh, skill to have. It's a very niche skill. Now AI can spit out any kind of COBOL code that you want. uh, Identification division and whatever else division, all that stuff. I mean, it was shocking to see that code again after so many years. But yeah, so AI will put programmers out of business, web developers out of business. It can create websites. It can create apps on iOS or Android. So all you will need now, you don't even need to know programming. You just need to have AI handhold you, and you're going to be able to create apps. You're going to be able to create websites. You're going to be able to do so many things. So it's going to transform the world, and it's still a little early to predict how it's going to go. But I think it's going to shake up the whole world, and people will have to adapt. Certain things may not be replaceable, but I am sure in 2 years time you could create this what I'm doing here as an AI. I mean, AI could output a fake version of me speaking just like me and saying the same things I would typically say, and you would not be able to tell the difference. That also may happen. Music, AI is already generating good music, reasonably good music that you can use in as background music for various videos and things like that. Soon it will be able to generate excellent, high quality, top quality music. That's coming. Video is going to come. So it's going to totally revolutionize the world. I'm not sure what the consequences of that is going to be are going to be. um, Soon it will happen that AI, you will have your own personalized AI. It will give you exactly the kind of music that you enjoy, the various genres and various moods that you have, that you like, that sort of thing. It will write novels for you, the kind of tastes that you have based on that, and so much more. You may even see news coming in various flavors, individually tailored to various people, and you will not really know what is true and what's not, what's right and what's wrong, what's fake news, what's true news. So there's a whole amount of possibilities out there. um, and it all depends on how AI is used. Like any technology, AI is just a technology. uh, so any technology can be used for good or for bad. Fire, when it was discovered, was used for cooking, which made everyone's life easier. It was also used for warfare. Fire, then steel can be used for good, it can be used for bad. Sticks can be used for good as well as bad. Nuclear energy has good uses and bad uses. Similarly, AI is just another tool in that manner. It can be used. It depends on who's using it. Uh, so typically, it's the when any new technology emerges, transformative technology emerges, it's typically governments and the military that make the the first use of that. And so that's also what's happening with AI. It's happening behind closed doors. We don't know what developments are happening, but yeah, it's going to affect all of us. So AI is something that we're going to have to revisit in great detail. Who was head over heels for John Wick 4? I haven't seen it. I think I've seen the first one or two movies. They were good movies. Keanu Reeves is good. I mean, great guy, great actor. I haven't seen 4, but let's see, maybe good, I suppose. Prakrit is kind of a branch or mutation of Sanskrit. Yes, it's the Prakrits are a bunch of daughter languages of Sanskrit. They came after Sanskrit. Right. FFF says, what would have happened if during the Turkic invasions of India, a powerful and ruthless king, emperor like Ashoka, was in power with the entire subcontinent united under him? It's very clear the Turkic invasions would have been smashed. The reason the Turkic invasions succeeded eventually after 2-3 centuries of attempting to invade India, it succeeded because India was not unified politically. See, political unity and disunity is a cyclical thing. There are cycles, historical cycles, imperial cycles. So there have been times when India was unified under a single leadership, like the Mauryan Empire, like the Kushan Empire, like the Gupta Empire, and so on. And there have been times when India was not unified under a single emperor or empire, and you had lots of different various kings and kingdoms and all that. So the Turks caught India at the wrong time when India was not politically united. Lalitaditya Muktapida's empire had gone, the Gupta Empire had gone. The Cholas were focusing on Southeast Asia 1,000 years ago, and the Chola Empire did not last long after that, after the demise of Rajaraj and Rajendra Chola. So the Turks started their invasions and they conducted their invasions at a time when India was not politically united. If India was politically united under a king like Ashoka, like under an emperor like Ashoka, or let's say Kanishka, or let's say one of the Gupta emperors like Skandagupta or Samudragupta, there is no way the Turkic invasions would have succeeded. They would have been smashed out of existence. So the Turks caught India at the wrong time, and that's what happened. So obviously this is all hypothetical, but we can make such predictions based on the cyclical events of history. So even the most ruthless and barbaric invader like Alexander the Greek, he wanted to invade India, but India was unified under the Nanda Empire at the time, and the invasion was a miserable failure. So and Alexander most likely was defeated by this small frontier king, small little chieftain called Purushottam, who's called Porus by the Greeks. And he had to go back limping to Babylon, where he died of his injuries. And his great horse, Bucephalus, died in the battle. I think the battle of the Jhelum or Sutlej, one of these battles. So when India is united under a single leadership, a strong leadership, it's impossible to invade and conquer India. So that's what would have happened if India was unified at the time. Okay, Chirag Avasti says, why can't we find any evidence of kingdoms and palaces of all the great kings of India, like Kanishka, Samudragupta, etc., but we can find their forts? Did they not have palaces at all? Well, look at the evidence. I have said this multiple times that Indian kings did not have great palaces, luxurious palaces. The Indian kings were expected to be servants of the people and the nation. So that was the highest morality of the king or emperor, to serve the nation and the people, not to serve himself, not to enrich himself or herself in the case of a female. I mean, if you look at somebody more recent, like the great queen Ahalya Bai Holkar, the house she lived in, it still exists. It was not a palace, it was a regular house. She did not live in a palace. She was a very powerful queen. She was one of the greatest queens we've had in the past 1,000 years. She did so much good for the people and for the civilization and for the people. She lived in a very modest house. Look at the various Maratha kings. The great Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, what kind of palace did he live in? He did not live in a palace. We have to understand the difference between a fort and a palace. A fort is a defensive fortification. It has military. It has a military purpose. It's not a palace. Obviously, you will have quarters for a king, for where you can have your council and do planning and strategy and all that. And it has to be well furnished and all that. But a fort is a military fortification. It has a military purpose, a strategic and defensive purpose, tactical purpose as well. So when it comes to the greatest of our emperors, rulers, whether it is the Mauryan emperors or the Kushan emperors like Kanishka, the Gupta emperors, we know where their capitals were. Where do you find the palace? You do find forts. We one of Kanishka's the forts that Kanishka built, it still exists in somewhere in Punjab. I forget the place. And yeah, and the example people give these days is that, Abhijit, you're wrong, because the Rajput kings of the past for 600 years or so, they had palaces. Well, that came much later, after the Turkic occupation of India. And and even those were actually forts with a certain amount of luxury in them, yes. But historically, before the past 1,000 years, the past millennium of humiliation, we had purely Indian culture in India, and you will not find a palace anywhere. You will find forts for sure, but you won't find palaces anywhere. Even if you go back to the so-called Harappan period, you don't find any palace anywhere. You find big buildings, great buildings, like what they call the public bath, which actually happens to be a temple's pond, and various other. The greatest buildings are the ones that are used for public works. You don't find any palace anywhere. So the truth is that India's kings and emperors did not have palaces. They did not invest in. They did not use public money, the nation's money, for their personal benefit and personal luxury. They would typically live in reasonably humble uh, abodes, and they did not have palaces. Show me a single palace that a king or a queen or an emperor lived in from before 1000 AD. From before 1000 AD. You won't find anything. Of course, after the so-called princely states were set up by the British, these princely puppets would build palaces for themselves. There are various examples. But yeah, so that is the answer to this question. Let us see what other questions do we have. Uh, Shri Balram Putin says, do you know that we can see planets on Google Maps? If yes, then use it to demonstrate for certain questions, because map is our best friend. Yes, you can. I think we can see the moon. I'm sure we can see Mars as well. Let me try and pull that up. Mars on Google Maps. Let's see. Google Mars. Yes, let us do that. So it's not in as much detail as you would otherwise have, like Google Earth, but we do have it. Let's see this. So this here is Google Mars. Yeah. So you can zoom out, you can zoom in. It's essentially a repetitive pattern, but yes, that's the best map that we have. How far can we zoom in? We can see reasonable amount of detail here. So there are certain reasonably famous locations on Mars. Where is Mount Olympus? I wonder. Is this Mount Olympus? I click here, it doesn't say anything. Yeah. So the thing is that yes, we can see the map of Mars. I'm sure we can see the moon as well. Google does give you that facility. So yeah, that is something that most people won't know. So it's good that Shri Balram Putinji has brought this to our attention. Okay, Rinigan says Manipur language is kra-dai, Thai kadai. Kra-dai became Kasai, then Kathi. Okay, I'm not familiar with this terminology. The Manipuri language that I am aware of is the Meitei language, which is a Tibeto-Burman language. It has its own script called Meitei Maek. And in the past, the Bengali script was used to write the Manipuri language as the vehicle to carry the Manipuri language, but now it's been changed, and now the original Manipuri script is used for it. I think there are a couple of versions of that script as well, so it's a work in progress. And I'm sure that there must be some kind of relationship between the Meitei language, the Manipuri language, and various so-called Naga languages. There are lots of different Naga languages. there must be some kind of relationship between these languages as well. Unfortunately, our researchers, our historians and linguists and geneticists have not really focused on the Northeast much, so we do not have great amount of insight into these matters. It's fascinating. A lot of research needs to be done about this. The Northeast, the Far East of India, is like a gold mine when it comes to research, whether it is sociological research or historical research or linguistic research or genetic research. It's a gold mine. It's an untapped gold mine. So much interesting research can be done, which will bring the facts to light. You know, the Far East of India is a beautiful place, very culturally unique place, a very interesting blend of traditions and culture and all that. So, it would be good if our researchers would look into this in more detail. Swapnil Mishra says, why is the phenomenon of turbulence considered to be one of the great unsolved mysteries of physics and mathematics? Well, when it comes to turbulence, we're talking about fluid dynamics, fluid flow. So, flow, the equations that govern the flow of fluids are, what are they called? Not the Klein-Gordon equation for sure. Uh, let's Google that. Fluid dynamics. It's something that I've never really looked into. Uh, because it's not been my field of interest. Fluid dynamics. What are the equations called? Um, the Navier-Stokes equations. Yes, the Navier-Stokes. So the Navier-Stokes equations are very simple when you look at them, but they are devilishly difficult to solve. And fluid dynamics, the flow of fluids and mixing of fluids, it's very fractal, it's very chaotic, and there are so many parameters and variables in that. So that's what turbulence is, the way fluids flow and mix with each other, and there are vortexes and all that. It's almost impossible to solve an equation cleanly with that. So that's why it's one of the great unsolved mysteries of physics. One of the interesting things is that when you have a drop of, let's say you have a tap, a faucet, and you have water slowly dripping out of it, drop by drop. So there is something called surface tension that keeps the shape of a water drop spherical. Surface tension, in case you're aware of it. So it kind of acts against gravity. That's why this drop is attached to the tap. But when sufficient amount of water comes in, the force of gravity overcomes the surface tension, and then one drop comes down. So when the drop is detaching from the water in the mouth of the tap, there is a certain instant where you have what you could consider to be a singularity over there, the place at which the drop pinches off. So fluid dynamics is an extremely complicated field. It's almost impossible to solve equations uh, you know fully, to have so that's why what scientists typically do is that they look for numerical solutions to various equations, and they try to model these systems in supercomputers, because there are so many parameters and all that involved that you need an extremely powerful computer. It's typically done in supercomputers, and you need a lot of computing power for that. So because of that, it's one of the great it's not exactly a mystery. We understand how it works, we understand the physics behind it, we understand the equations that govern turbulence, the Navier-Stokes equations. It's just that you can't solve these equations. These are extremely difficult to solve. uh, so that's the thing about fluid dynamics and turbulence. Okay, who look at this. Jaswan Raj Singh says, who was Ivan the Terrible? He was one of the great emperors of Russia. I don't remember which century he lived in, but he kind of consolidated the Russian Empire and expanded it greatly. And he was very terrible. He had this terrible temper. I think he even caused the death of his own son. He struck him with something, and his son died as a result. So, and he was very brutal, very cruel, extremely short tempered, but he did expand the Russian Empire significantly and strengthen Russia. So that's why he's considered to be one of the strong and great emperors of Russia, but a very terrible guy. So that's what I can tell you in brief. I think there is this painting. Ivan the Terrible kills his son or something like that. Yeah, there is Ivan the Terrible and his son, Ivan. So let me put that on the screen briefly. This guy, because of his temper, he ended up killing his own son. And this is a painting of that, Ivan the Terrible and his son, Ivan. So then he realizes what he has done, but there was nothing he could do about it after he grievously injured his son. So yeah, that is Ivan the Terrible, well, one of the more remarkable historical figures from Russia. From Russia. Right, let's take other questions. As I can see, there are lots of questions coming in. Pratham Kalavadia says, how does learning about history and geopolitics help in business and investing? Look, when it comes to business, let's talk about business first. Business is about competition. It's about competing with others who are in your field, in your industry. So what is business? It's about identifying solutions that affect society and solving those problems and monetizing the solution to those problems. And typically in any industry which is aimed at solving certain problems, you will have various actors uh, who are competing with each other in providing solutions. So you have to, in some ways, cooperate with some of them. In some cases you have to compete with some of them. So that is extremely similar to what happens in geopolitics. We have one planet, we have different nations. Some nations stick together and cooperate when it comes to uh, their shared interests. And in some cases you have nations that compete, in some cases you have nations that go to war against each other. It's the same thing happens in business. So the principles are pretty much similar or almost the same. Investing, now even in investing, if you look at the geopolitical trends and if you look at the investing patterns of the various national banks like the RBI or the Federal Reserve or the Bank of Japan and all that, and you see what they've been doing the past 50 years or 100 years, then you can also learn a lot about investing and as to how they rode the various winds of change, and how they uh, adapted and changed and molded their investing strategies as to what to invest in. Nations also invest in things. Every nation, the national bank will invest in gold, for instance, in US treasury bonds. Nowadays nations are dumping that. So it kind of tells you how things are going. So, l- and to understand geopolitics, you obviously have to understand history well. So you know there is this book of strategy. It's a book of stratagems called The Art of War. It's written by a person called Sun Tzu, who lived in China about 2000 something years ago. And that book is used in business, as a book that you can in business, even in sport. So the strategies and stratagems and tactics that you use in warfare, in geopolitics, can equally well be applied in business and in sport and even in investing. So yes, if you can significantly broaden your horizons, study history and geopolitics in detail, you will certainly be able to take the same lessons that you learn from here, geopolitics, and apply them in business and investing and other spheres of life. So very interesting question. That's something that most people don't quite see. Very good to see this question. Ramai Raj Singh says, how am I supposed to convince a Pakistani about their Hindu heritage and other historical facts, Hindu genocide, etc.? Was recently talking to one and he was confident about his non Indian heritage. My question is, why do you have to convince anybody? Why? What are you going to gain out of it? What will India gain out of it? Let them believe whatever they want to believe. It's their choice. Uh, I personally never try to convince anyone of anything. If somebody has a set of beliefs, I say, good luck, enjoy. We know what the facts are. Now why do we have to convince others? How will it see? People have beliefs that they have internalized, and they hold on to those beliefs very strongly. Most people don't want to change their mind. Most people don't think logically, rationally, and it's a fool's errand trying to convince somebody who has no interest in changing their mind, no matter how much evidence you throw at them. So my policy is very simple: I don't waste my time trying to convince anybody. People ask me questions, I answer the questions. It's up to them to believe me or not. It's entirely their choice. I'm not going to waste my time convincing somebody. So I would say that, why are you supposed to convince a Pakistani about the truth? Why? What are you gaining out of it? What will India gain from it? So, so my answer is, why should you do it? And I don't really know about any strategy or tactics as to how to convince somebody who doesn't want to listen to the truth. So I think it's actually a waste of time. Please, Ramai, don't waste your time doing all this. Uh, I'm sure you have a lot of energy and a bit of time. So use it wisely and judiciously, and don't waste it on people who have no interest in seeing the truth. That's what I would say. All right. Wait, I thought Ivar was Ragnar's son. Are bhai. We were talking about Ivan the Terrible, not Ivar. Ivar the Boneless. These are two different individuals from two different time periods. The spelling of Ivan the Terrible is Ivan. The spelling of Ivar the Boneless is Ivar. There's a difference between R and M. Why am I even doing this? Oh, God. Please. All right. What's the future of gaming? Gaming is a huge industry. I think gaming is a bigger industry today than the entertainment industry. I think gaming, the gaming industry overall is bigger than Hollywood and all of this put together. So these days, with the advent of all these devices, portable devices, mobile phones and tablets and iPads and Android tablets and laptops, which is like a thing of the past, kind of, all these things. Because of this, now everybody has a device. Even 3-year-old kids have their own device nowadays. So everybody is engrossed in that, and everybody keeps on playing some games, which gives you this dopamine release and makes you feel pleasure. So it's something that's extremely addictive. And yeah, so it's something that's going to continue. So I think gaming is going to be a very big industry. It's kind of catching on in India as well. You have gaming, esports is also gaming, isn't it? So esports is taking off in India. Lots of gamers, prominent gamers, are becoming influencers. They're making a lot of money out of that. So I think gaming is going to keep on growing. It's going to keep on growing. And I don't know if there are any gaming developers or companies in India itself. But yeah, so what Indians consume is Western games. Earlier we had PUBG, which is a Chinese thing, but it's been banned in India for obvious reasons. So I think the future of gaming is bright as an industry. It's going to make a lot of money. And with the advent of AI, you're going to have AI enabled games and much better graphics. And so I suppose with the advent of AI, just about anybody could start developing games. You will not need a huge team of people to work under you. A bunch of people who work on the graphics, and a bunch of people who work on the storyline, and a bunch of people who do the programming, the coding, and putting all that together. You need a big team for that. It's a lot of money. But with the advent of AI, I think even individuals could start creating games, good games, high quality games. And you have platforms like Steam, I believe, and Xbox and PlayStation, etc., which are some of the major platforms that I can think of. I'm sure there are more as well. So I think the gaming industry is an industry that is going to keep on growing, and I think it's poised for definitely becoming much bigger. It's already bigger than the entertainment industry. I think it could eventually end up dwarfing the entertainment industry. To the end users, the consumers, I would say that use it judiciously. It's fun to play a game. Even I've done that. I had one of the earlier, today, what's the version of PlayStation that we have? Is it PS4 or PS5? We have one of those two. I had a PS2. The PS1 was this enormous box. The PS2 was a sleeker box. So I had bought a PS2, I think in 2004 or something. And I had a few games that I used to play. One of them, a car racing game. It's more like a car crashing game or something. So I used to play once in a while. The thing is, if you spend your whole day doing this, you will end up doing nothing in life. So yeah, that's a word of caution I would like to give you. I myself have done some gaming a long time ago. I no longer do it, uh, because I have too much else to do. So it's a good outlet to let off some steam, have some fun, but don't do it too much. Maybe an hour or two maximum per day is, I think, already too much. Yeah, I think in China they have restricted kids their online time to about 2 hours per week. That's what Mr. Xi Jinping has done. I think that's a little bit excessive, but I can understand the thought process behind it. Uh, so yeah, that's what I think about the future of gaming. Interesting question that you have asked. All right, let's see. Arya Singh, what are the findings of the excavation of the submerged Dwarka city? What are the research papers I should read regarding it? I have no idea. I don't think any research has been done in the past 20 years. I think it was the archaeologist S.R. Rao who discovered the submerged city more than 20 years ago, maybe around 30 years ago. I think it was in the 1980s or 1990s, somewhere around that time, definitely before the 21st century. And after this discovery, they've done nothing about it. Nothing. The ASI is doing nothing. As far as I know, if I am mistaken, I will be happy to admit the mistake. But as far as I know, they have been doing nothing. What should be happening is underwater archaeology, and that site should be well preserved, and we should ensure that no dredging happens or no other activity happens there. I don't even know what's happening there. And they also have discovered the entire Gulf of Khambat, Gulf of Cambay archaeological complex, which is not just one city, submerged city. It's a whole network of underwater cities. So it's like 10, 12,000 years old. um, so I don't think any significant archaeological work is happening when it comes to Dwarka or the Gulf of Khambat archaeological complex. I have no idea what research papers exist. It's I mean, I've looked for it. I can find almost nothing, so I don't know. I'm I have found various articles in various websites, in blogs and all that, but that's not quite a research paper, and it doesn't have the credibility of a research paper. So I hope the ASI looks into this matter. I mean, it's up to the government to direct them to do certain things. The ASI, see, there are some good people in the ASI. SR Rao, SR Rao was one of the great archaeologists. Dr. Bibi Lal, who Dr. Bibi Lal was once the head of the ASI. He's one of the greatest archaeologists the world has ever seen. So the ASI has produced some good archaeologists, some great ones, but the majority of the archaeologists, I believe, they have this bureaucratic mindset, and the leadership of the ASI, I mean, whoever runs it is typically bureaucrats. So I don't know what mindset they have, what agenda they have, what outlook they have, but clearly they're not doing what needs to be done. So that is disappointing. I have said this in the past, that the ASI actually ideally should be disbanded completely, and a new professional organization needs to be created from scratch, and the funding should be invested into that. So yeah, so I don't really know what's happening with Dwarka. I don't think anything is being done in recent times, in the past 10 years at least. Akshay Kolgiri says, please tell us about Deng Xiaoping and his contribution to China's growth. So Deng Xiaoping came to power after you could say in the aftermath of the death of the great chairman Mao. And Deng Xiaoping, he took the nation of China in a totally different direction. Under Mao, there was a lot of mismanagement. There was the cultural revolution, the great leap forward, which were enormous disasters when it came to China. I don't know, close to I don't know, the death toll is between 40 and 80 million Chinese people, and these economies suffered greatly as a result. There were famines and all kinds of disasters. So Deng Xiaoping wanted a more modern approach. He wanted China to become rich and prosperous. He said, I believe that being rich is glorious and we should be rich. So he set about transforming China's economy and the way the entire nation was run. He took his inspiration from the great Singaporean dictator, benevolent dictator Lee Kuan Yew. And he said that, Lee Kuan Yew was Deng Xiaoping said that Lee Kuan Yew was fortunate that he had to only turn around the fortunes of a city state, Singapore, So it can be done in Shanghai or whatever, but if you have a nation the size of China, it will take a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and a lot of time to achieve something similar to what to what Lee Kuan Yew was able to do in just 20 years. So after the advent of Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese sent lots of officials to Singapore to study the Singaporean methods, how they had gone about doing things, and then they set about replicating the same in China. So Deng Xiaoping is the guy who started the transformation of China into from a third world, extremely poor, starving nation into a nation that is now the world's second largest economy. It is Deng Xiaoping who started the process, and to a large extent, it is Deng Xiaoping who's responsible for a significant amount of China's success. And he said that China needs to hide your capabilities and bide your time, which means don't boast, don't publicize your greatness if you have any. Uh, Hide your capabilities, work as hard as possible, and wait for the right time. So he passed away a long time ago, but it was Mr. Xi Jinping who, I think in 2012, decided that the right time is now. And that's what started the wolf warrior diplomacy and China's belligerent, newfound belligerence, which we can now see. It's been there for a decade at least. Uh, so that's about Deng Xiaoping, the guy who totally transformed China. He started the process that transformed China, and it was during his time that China started militarizing as well. Uh, the naval build up that China now has the world's largest navy by numbers. Not necessarily the most powerful navy, but definitely the largest navy in terms of numerical strength. So all of these things that China currently enjoys, the root of all that is Deng Xiaoping. So definitely the greatest leader China produced in the past after Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong obviously did a lot of mismanagement, but obviously he also is one of the greats from the Chinese perspective. So so yeah, that's Deng Xiaoping. All right, let's see other questions. Uh, just another nerd. How do gravitational waves look like in three dimensions? And when will you open a Discord server? That's totally two very different servers. How do gravitational waves look like in three dimensions? Go to a lake or a pond, right? Take a stone and drop it, throw it into the pond. What do you see? You're gonna see a splash, and you're gonna see ripples radiate outwards. That's what gravitational waves look like in three dimensions. So you have length, you have breadth, and you have height. That's exactly like what gravitational waves look like in three dimensions. Obviously space time is four dimensional, so you can't really visualize that because there's the element of time as well. And gravitational waves also affect time. It's going to cause ripples not just in space but also in time. So the actual gravitational waves are four dimensional waves, but to think of it in three dimensions, you have to think of exactly like what happens when you throw a stone, a pebble, onto the surface of a lake or a pond, and you see ripples radiating outwards in concentric circles. That's what gravitational waves look like. So when you have a gravitational event like let's say the merger of two black holes, the merger of two neutron stars, or neutron star and black hole, you're going to see gravitational waves radiating outwards in the same manner. And the amplitudes means which means the height of the waves is going to be very high when it comes to the merger of two black holes, because it's a very very powerful and energetic event. So in that case, in the merger of two black holes, you're going to see a gravitational, not a wave but actually a tsunami, enormous. And that's why we are able to detect it all the way over here, because it's only the largest waves that the large that LIGO can detect. So that's what gravitational waves look like in three dimensions. When will I open a Discord server? I'm in the process of opening a Discord server. It's going to be managed properly and professionally this time. Last time I had not hired anybody to do it. It was kind of not going well, and I obviously don't have a huge amount of time to come every day and interact with people. So I need somebody to manage it professionally. So it's in the process of being set up. It actually exists if you know where to look, right? That's about the Discord server. um all right, let's see some other questions. Who are Caucasian hunter gatherers, CHG? Are they in some way related to India? See, what is the Caucasus? Let's find the Caucasus, shall we? For that, we have to go to the map. The map is our best friend. So when we talk about the Caucasus, we're talking about the Kavkaz region, which connects, which is the landmass between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. That region is called the Caucasus, right? It's called Kavkaz in Russian. So we have southern Russia, we have Chechnya, we have Dagestan, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. That is the Caucasus. So in the distant past, you had a bunch of hunter gatherers who lived there. Those are the Caucasian hunter gatherers. Are they in some way related to India? I think, see, eventually everybody is related to each other, because as we know, the the best evidence that we have as of today tells us that humanity originated in Africa, and humans crossed over from Africa into Eurasia, most likely over here, the Bab al Mandeb Strait. This was the closest point. So they somehow crossed over, our ancestors, from here into the Arabian Peninsula. And the coastline of the Arabian Peninsula had some greenery, so that's why they were able to travel and migrate. And once again, they had to cross the Persian Gulf from across the Strait of Hormuz, and they came into Asia. And the coastal regions again over here were kind of, they had some vegetation, so they went eastwards and eventually they came into India. And India was completely lush green, so that's where humanity first settled down after the out of Africa migration. That is some 75,000 or so years ago. And it was, so India was the first founders zone of the out of Africa migration. And from India, humanity migrated in all directions: east, west, north, and south. Eventually, humans ended up in Australia some 60 or 65,000 years ago. And so it was from India that humans migrated east as well as west, and eventually into Europe, where they encountered Neanderthals. There was some intermixing of the genetics and so on. So the Caucasian hunter gatherers were the descendants of all of these to and fro, back and forth migrations. But were the Caucasian hunter gatherers in some way related to India? So, in that way, they were related. Obviously, we need more genetic evidence to see if there is any closer genetic affinity between the CHG individuals and ancient Indians who lived in India at that time. So, that's what I can tell you. What else do we have? Lots of questions as always. This is by Anisha. Recently, Bhutan's king was given respect in Germany. Just after that, for the first time, a democratic elections took place in Bhutan, followed by comments on Doklam by Bhutan. Is the US behind it? See, understand, the US is the most powerful nation in the world. They have an enormous amount of influence everywhere in the world, including inside India. So, uh, so I have not followed this chain of events that Bhutan's king was given respect in Germany. See, typically when a head of state, king, queen, prime minister, president, etc., goes to another country, they are given respect anywhere you go. Even even if you go to a nation that's kind of your enemy, you are given the kind of respect that is given to a head of state. So I am not aware of what happened in Germany, but okay, let's say this, all this is what happened. So Germany, as we know, is a nation that is controlled by the US. It's under US military occupation since 1945. Um, and I have obviously heard of the comment on Doklam by one of the Bhutanese officials about the fact that and he claims that it's a matter that's between Bhutan, China, and India, that sort of thing. Uh, so either it's China that's behind it, or it's the US that's behind it, or maybe both are behind it. Um, so we don't know, right? We don't know because we don't have the information of what happened, of what interactions and talks happened between, let's say, the Bhutanese officials and the Chinese, maybe, or maybe the Americans, or maybe some intermediaries somewhere else. We don't know what transpired. We don't know what happened. And because we don't have this information, this evidence, that's why we can't really tell what happened and who's behind it. But there's a possibility that the Chinese may be behind it, and they have gained influence in Bhutan. Maybe there's a possibility that maybe the Americans are behind it, and they are trying to destabilize India's relationship with Bhutan. Or maybe the Bhutanese themselves have made a certain choice. Possibly, perhaps. We don't know yet, but time will tell us. So, how will time tell us? We have to keep on observing the various statements that the Bhutanese officials and the government make. And based on the pattern that we observe over a certain period of time, we can make a more precise uh, we can arrive at a more precise and stronger understanding of what actually is going on and who's behind it and what the motivations and agendas are. But yes, this is something that's currently happening, and this is something that we are all going to keep an eye on Bhutan and what stance it takes. All right, what else? Kanhai Bhatt says, should Sanskrit and Proto-Dravidian be made the two official languages of Bharat, both of them being the mother languages of their language families? Will that solve the language divide? The so-called Dravidian languages are, if there is no such thing as a Dravidian language. Okay, this term Dravidian, you will not find anywhere in India's historical texts. It is something that was created by the British to divide India. Okay, so there is no such thing as Proto-Dravidian. Which language is Proto-Dravidian? This is a completely fake, false, artificial category that was created by the British, by Robert Caldwell, the Christian missionary Robert Caldwell. He created this fake categorization of Aryan versus Dravidian. These are all fake categories. I don't know why we are all so brainwashed and we believe this. The only what was the language that the Cholas took to Southeast Asia? It was not Tamil, it was Sanskrit. You do find some Tamil inscriptions here and there, but the Cholas, their state, the language they promoted in Southeast Asia was Sanskrit, not Tamil. When it comes to the Indianization of Southeast Asia, which happened long before the Cholas, it happened around 3,000 years ago. That was done by the merchants from Kalinga, present-day Orissa. What language do you find in Southeast Asia? Indian language. It's Sanskrit. All the way to the Philippines, you have Sanskrit. The only language, this divide that we are talking about, the language divide, is an artificial language divide that has been created by the British. It is being perpetuated and strengthened by certain political factions, certain politicians, for personal gain. Divide and rule, that's still continuing in India. So there is no such thing as a Proto-Dravidian language, which is the mother language of some hypothetical Dravidian language family. India's linguistics needs to be looked at a priori fresh, not by existing linguists who all are brainwashed. You need a completely fresh look at India's linguistics. If the so-called Dravidian languages were a separate language family, why are the so-called Indo-Aryan languages so much closer and similar to Kannada and Tulu and Telugu, etc., and Malayalam than to German? But apparently Hindi is part of the Indo-European language family. And yet Hindi is so much closer, Sanskrit is so much closer to Tulu, to Telugu, to Kannada, to Malayalam, to Tamil, etc. So clearly these categorizations are completely incorrect. We have to look at India's linguistics from a complete a priori perspective. Start from scratch again. That's what needs to happen. The only language that can be the official language, the civilizational language of India, is Sanskrit. No other language. No other language. All right. What do we have? What else do we have? Akshat says, should young people enter politics? If yes, how can one start? By joining a political party or creating a new one? Let's say you want to create a new political party. How will you create it? How will you attract people to join your party? What kind of political part? What kind of leadership structure will it have? Let's say you start a new political party. Why should people accept you as leader? You have to ask yourself these questions. And what really goes into organizing a political party and conducting activities? Let's say you form a political party, you convince, let's say, 100 people to join the party, and you convince them to accept you as their leader. How will you run the activities of the political party? You need an office, you need a building, you're going to need money for that. If you want to hold a rally, it takes a lot of organization, coordination, it takes money. You want to hold rallies, you want to uh, run an election campaign. Do you have any idea how much money goes into running an election campaign? Huge amounts of money. Politics is all about money. There's a reason why politics is all about money. So if a young person wants to enter politics, you can create a new political party, but it's not going to get any traction. You will have to join an existing political party. That's the only actual option that exists. You're going to have to join a political party. So it's good for young people to enter politics. It's definitely good. Um, and you have to understand how politics really works. You have to understand what is the nature of power. Politics is all about power. There's a huge amount of money that goes into running a political movement and a party. So these are things that you have to look into. So it's good for young people to enter politics, but it will take you some time to get used to it. And the young people, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of passion, etc. You believe in certain causes, but when you're young, you are naive. That is that's something which is just there. It's a fact of life. If I think of myself when I was 20, how I was when I was 20 years old, I was incredibly naive. I was clueless about how the world worked. It takes time. That's why they say that in politics, if a person is 45 or 50 years old, that person is young. That's what they say. So young people should certainly enter politics, but you're going to have a long period of time in which you're going to be learning. There's going to be a big period of learning, at least a decade in which you will learn things. And only then will you have some maturity as to how to navigate the world of politics. But yeah, it's good for young people to enter politics for sure. Right. Pratik Jain says we are providing grains to Taliban. Aren't we supporting the Taliban to disturb and to create problems in Pakistan? Is it white funding by Indian government or masterstroke of Modi government to weaken our enemy? Listen, we are India has been supporting Afghanistan and providing monetary, financial, and humanitarian assistance and doing development activities in Afghanistan for at least 30 years. Okay, and during this time period, you had various governments that were in power, and the Taliban wasn't in power for much of this time. So, whatever aid and support India is providing to Afghanistan is meant for the people of Afghanistan, irrespective of who is in power. Now, it's not a secret that the Taliban is closely, not closely, but to a certain extent aligned with India. See, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, which year did it happen? A couple of years ago. The Americans left Afghanistan overnight. The Taliban took over. It was a period of extreme chaos. We saw what happened. The Americans are evacuating, and people are trying to jump on those planes, and it was a disaster. The Americans left overnight. It was complete chaos, and the Taliban moved in to fill in the power vacuum. And there was a big period of chaos and uncertainty. It took the Taliban some time to take control of the nation. So when all this was happening, the Americans were leaving and various embassies were evacuating. India was also evacuating its embassy in Kabul and in other places. And the Taliban provided full support to India, full cooperation. Not a single Indian was harassed or harmed or delayed in any way whatsoever. Nothing happened. Yeah, we know some journalist was shot by the Taliban. That's a different story. That journalist was not part of the Indian government. That's a whole different thing. But no Indian person, apart from that one journalist, was touched by the Taliban or harmed or hampered or abducted or delayed or any such thing. The Taliban gave full cooperation to India. So India was able to evacuate all its personnel and also some Afghans as well out of Kabul. And then after the stability came back, India has reopened its consulate and various things. India is engaging with the Taliban on the diplomatic front. India is restarting its humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. The Taliban has been asking India to restart development activities. Do you know why? It's because India's development activities have helped the common man, woman, and child in Afghanistan. India spent about well in excess of $1 billion in all these activities. India constructed dams, India constructed highways and roads, India constructed the Afghan parliament building, and much schools, hospitals, all these things. India invested a lot of money in agricultural works in Afghanistan. All of these things, they have benefited the common man, woman, and child. None of the money India invested in Afghanistan has gone into the pockets of various corrupt Afghan politicians. So because of this, the Taliban, even though it is whatever it is, it sincerely appreciates India and what India has done. So whatever we are doing is in support of the Afghan people. It is not in support of the Taliban. If you send, let's say, 1,000 tons of wheat, it's gonna who's it gonna help? It's gonna help the people of Afghanistan. It's not gold we are sending, or US dollars we are sending, or rupees we are sending. We are sending wheat. The Taliban can't eat all the wheat, right? They're gonna have to distribute it to the people. Uh, so we are supporting Afghanistan from a genuine desire to stabilize the country. And what India seeks is a stable and peaceful Afghanistan. And India sincerely wants the conditions to get better for the people of Afghanistan. India, obviously, I don't think India has officially recognized the Taliban government, but India is definitely working with them hand in hand in some ways. Now we know, you're asking about Pakistan here. Uh, See, when the Taliban took over, people were saying, lots of famous geopolitical commentators were saying that this is a disaster for India. The Taliban are a Pakistani creation. At that time, I had said, that Taliban is going to be Pakistan's number one enemy. The Taliban are Pashtun nationalists, and they do not recognize the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, which was the Durand Line created by the British. There are significant Pashtun majority areas that are currently within Pakistan, the Pashtunistan region, the northwest frontier province. I said the Taliban wants it back. They want it to be part of Afghanistan again. So there is a big, massive border dispute between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the Taliban are Pashtun nationalists. It doesn't matter who created the Taliban 30 years ago. Today's Taliban is an Afghan nationalist, Pashtun nationalist government, and they seek this territory back. And there are various factions of the Taliban also. There is the Afghan Taliban, which rules Afghanistan now. There's the Pakistani Taliban, which the Pakistani is considered to be a terrorist organization, which is not exactly run by the Afghans. It also will have Pashtuns, but it is based out of Pakistan, and it seeks to wage war against the Pakistani government and the Pakistani army. So whatever terrorist activities are happening within Pakistan, I mean, obviously the Pakistanis themselves have created the terrorism and the terrorists. It's coming back to bite them in the back. So India is not funding any terrorist activities. India is simply helping the people of Afghanistan. All right. So India has never supported terrorism. India will never support terrorism. Terrorism is barbaric. It is inhuman, and it is totally illegal. Terrorism has to be stamped out, wiped out, which is why Pakistan needs to be dealt with eventually. So India is not helping the Taliban. India is helping Afghanistan. The Taliban know this. India is helping their people, which is why the Taliban are significantly favorably inclined towards India. The Taliban also know that India does not wish to conquer Afghanistan or take any Afghan territory. Even in the future, when India and Afghanistan will again have a common border, India is not going to pose any threat to Afghanistan. They know it. And that's why they are so much more favorably inclined towards India than to Pakistan, despite their religious issues and all that. So obviously, the Taliban are an Islamic emirate. They are an Islamic fundamentalist organization, which obviously will, from that perspective, it would make sense for them to be favorably inclined towards Pakistan. And yet, it's not the case. It's because of India's track record of helping the people of Afghanistan. So India is not going to fund any terrorist activities anywhere whatsoever. That will never happen. But yes, I expect that India will support the Taliban government in its struggle against Pakistani terrorism. That certainly will happen, and that takes various shapes and forms. Okay, let's see what else. Shubhajit Gorai says, why are Indians so inferior? Who says Indians are inferior? Okay, let's continue. I have seen many Videshi foreign YouTubers making reaction videos on YouTube about India. Those videos get millions of views and they make lots of money. Average Europeans are not like that. That's very interesting. Yeah. You have all kinds of reaction videos on YouTube. So reaction to some Indian movie, like RRR is a big deal these days. So lots of foreigners are reacting to RRR, and these videos get millions of views from India. And you also have various Pakistani reaction channels that react to Indian things that happen in India. They react to YouTube videos coming out of India and all. And Indians watch this, and Indians enjoy watching this. And obviously, you have European and American YouTubers who make reaction videos about India, and those also get millions of views. So why is it so? It's because Indians, to some extent, see, Indians are not inferior, but lots of Indians have an inferiority complex. Understand the difference. The difference being between being actually inferior and believing that you are inferior. You are not actually inferior, but you believe that you are inferior, or that some others are superior. That's called an inferiority complex. You may not be inferior to anyone, but you have been conditioned to believe that others are better than you. That's an inferiority complex. And most Indians, unfortunately, not most, hopefully, but many Indians have this. So they crave foreign validation. If a movie comes out in India and people from outside India start praising it, then Indians will go and watch it and they'll say this is a great movie. But if a movie comes out which may be great, but it doesn't get any foreign validation, then Indians will not regard that movie as very good. This is an inferiority complex that lots of Indians have, unfortunately. And why is it so? What is the root or the root cause or the origin of this inferiority complex? It is the education system and the media. The education system makes Indians believe that they are, there's nothing great about India. And the education system portrays foreign occupiers and destroyers of India as being good and better than Indians. Like the the Turks, they did a lot of good things for India. Akbar was great, apparently. And the British totally reformed Indian society and got rid of all the evil, backward aspects of Indian society. And they enlightened and liberated us. And they gave us this great English language. And they gave us Western education. And they taught Indians math and science because India never had these things. And they built railways for us. And they gave us the British law, the judiciary. Without the British, we would have never had anything. So all of this is brainwashing. And this is what you're taught in the education system. And we are told, most Indians grow up believing that the British liberated India from the Mughals, from the Turks, which is not the case. The British actually defeated the Maratha Empire, which had already liberated India from the Mughals. So the education system brainwashes Indians into feeling that they are totally inferior to everybody else. And the media and Bollywood continue that. So you are taught a certain kind of thing as when you're growing up, and what you learn when you're growing up, you cherish those memories, and you hold on to that for dear life. And then after you are a teenager and after you've grown up, you watch Bollywood, you watch the news media and all that, and all of this keeps on reinforcing all these notions that you have. And that's why Indians have this inferiority complex, in which they believe that outsiders are better, they are superior. So if they say something nice about India, we should really rejoice. So when an Indian movie gets some kind of accolade or award from outside, it's like a great celebration in India. Who cares? I mean, I don't care, but most Indians do. So that's the reason why it is like this. And that's why Indians, that's why these foreign YouTubers who make reaction videos or whatever about India, they get so many views, and it's a great business for them. Yeah, that's how it is. Okay. Saurabh says, I wasted my 12th standard 2022 in a drop year. I want to become an engineer or a scientist. Can I still become? I'm addicted to the mobile phone. What can I do? Please guide me. Listen, if you are addicted to something, you want to break the addiction, the best way of doing it, I would imagine, is to replace that activity with something else which is equally interesting or worthwhile. So listen, if you wasted 1 year, that's okay. You can always go back the next year, do your 12th, and continue on the path. It's not going to affect you too much in the long run. Uh, if you are addicted to the mobile phone, to some extent, it's about willpower. Put it down and open the book and study, right? Uh, so I don't know, I'm not an addiction counselor or something, and I really haven't really faced any major addiction or any such thing. So I don't know how one would go about overcoming an addiction. I think the I would imagine the best way to give up an addiction is to draw into your reserves of willpower, put down the mobile phone, or maybe give yourself come to an agreement with yourself that I will use the mobile phone, do all that scrolling and whatever you do, 1 hour a day maximum. That will be my reward for doing all the study that I'm supposed to do. Something like that. So you have to become disciplined. At the end of the day, it's your responsibility. Nobody else is going to help you out. You have to find the strength and the willpower and the willingness to do what is best for you. So the motivating factor is that should be that you want to become an engineer or a scientist. That should motivate you, and if the motivation is strong enough, then you will be able to do it. So it's okay if you dropped 1 year. So what? Big deal. Life is long. You're gonna live to 100. Okay, so 1 year is not going to make a big difference. Go back the next year, study hard, get your 12th standard done, and then move on in life. That is what I would tell you from the big picture perspective. Pratik says, why do Latin Americans have the same skin tone and facial structure like South Asians? I strongly dislike this term South Asians. What is South Asia? It's the Indian subcontinent, right? So let me go to the map, and let's make the map flat for a change. Here's the flat map. So look at the latitudes. Look at the latitude where India is at. If you click here, it says what? 34.84 and 77 point something. So India lies between the 36th latitude and, let's say, the equator. So between those latitudes, we also have Mexico. So it makes sense that the people who live in the same latitudes will have a similar kind of skin tone because we get similar amounts of sunlight. So and obviously in the southern hemisphere also you have the same latitudes up to 30 or something, 36, let's say. Let's go further around here. So that's why the people who live up to let's say Uruguay, Argentina, and up to the northern part of Mexico and all that, historically the people who lived there would have a very similar skin color as the people who live in the Indian subcontinent. So it's the amount of sunlight that you receive that typically determines your skin tone and skin color. Facial features and all, that is, I don't know, we don't quite have the answer. Maybe we would need to look into the genetics, but skin color I can definitely answer. It's because of the same latitudes and the same amount of sunlight that you receive. So even people in northern Africa, they would have similar skin tones as the people of India, and so on. The facial structure, the facial features, yeah, it's true. Lots of Indians, when they go to the US, they are kind of mistaken for what they call Hispanic people, because you have a very similar skin color and similar facial features as well. So when it comes to facial features, I'm not quite sure why it is so. Maybe the answer lies in the field of genetics, perhaps. So that's something that has not quite been researched thus far. Aryan says, can there be dimensions in fractions like 1.5 or 2.5 dimension? What are your thoughts on, can there be a third dimension of mathematics? As first and second are real number line and complex numbers. See, the real number line is not a dimension. The complex number line is not a dimension. That's not how you look at. You have the complex field and all. So you have to go deeper into mathematics to understand that these are not dimensions. These are different ways of looking at numbers. Now, can there be fractal dimensions, fractional dimensions? So you have Euler's number. Let me put that on the screen. Euler's number. It's called E, right? I think in school and all, we all learn about the number E, Euler's number, which is 2.718, whatever. Yeah, 2.7182818, etc. It's a It's an irrational number. It can be represented as this summation. Recently, Dr. Subhash Kak, who has been on my podcast at least twice, if I recall correctly, at least twice. So he has come up with this new theory in which the universe may not be three-dimensional or four-dimensional or 10 or 11 or 26 dimensional. It may actually be e-dimensional. So the universe may not have all these dimensions, three or four or whatever. It may have 2.7183 dimensions, which makes no sense, because we cannot visualize dimensions in that manner. But maybe our senses kind of don't tell us what really happens, what's really out there. It would be too complicated for our brain, our minds to process cognitively in real time. So maybe what we see of the world is an oversimplification of what is really out there. Because see, look at the color spectrum. Okay, color spectrum. You know the colors, right? The colors of the rainbow: VIBGYOR, Vibgyor. Now we perceive colors. This is the color spectrum. Do you see pink in here? The color pink doesn't exist in the spectrum. Do you see the color black in here? The black color doesn't exist in the spectrum. The gray color, gray, it also is not part of the spectrum. So black and pink and gray are non-spectral colors. They don't even exist. And yet we see these colors, which tells you that the brain, the mind, the consciousness is somehow interpreting certain combinations of color of the electromagnetic spectrum, light, and the absence of electromagnetic light in some frequencies as the color pink, magenta, or black, or gray. So these are non-spectral colors. So this should give you an indication of the fact that what we see is not really what the universe is. Sometimes it is an oversimplification. So similarly, maybe we have 2.7183 dimensions instead of 3, but we see it as 3, just to simplify things. Because if we see it in the universe with the true complexity that it has, then our little brains will not be able to process all this information cognitively in real time. And if we can't process the information properly, it will hamper our chances of surviving long term. So that's the thing. So it is certainly possible that the universe may actually have 2.7183 dimensions. Interesting. Okay, let us see other questions. Rahul says, how would a hypothetical war between Rome and the Mauryas have played out in the first century CE? Okay, a hypothetical question. Let's look at the map as always. So, to understand a hypothetical war between the Romans and the Mauryas, we have to first understand how far Rome, Italy, is from the Mauryan Empire, which is India. Let's do a straight line distance over here. That's 6,000 kilometers roughly. If you were to, okay, let's clear this. Let's say we go to the eastern fringe of the Roman Empire. Let's say we go to, let's say, Thrace, which is current day Eastern Europe, and we measure this distance from there to the border of the Mauryan Empire, which is Afghanistan. Let's say that is still 3,000 kilometers. So any such war would happen at enormous distances. The Romans would have either to come all the way to India, or the Mauryan Empire would have had to go all the way into the Roman Empire. So whoever has to travel large distances is going to be at a disadvantage, because you have to essentially live off the land. You have to either live off the land or carry enormous amounts of resources, very long distances, which gives you a significant disadvantage. Or maybe let's say that the war was fought in the Caucasus region. So then the question arises, which empire had more resources? So if you I don't have the GDP figures over here right now, but India at that time accounted for at least a third of the entire globe's GDP, and Europe was a fraction of that. A fraction, which means the Roman Empire was a fraction of that. So obviously the Mauryan army, the Mauryan Empire would have had access to way more resources than the Romans. So your military strength is going to be proportional to your GDP. And the Indian GDP, Mauryan GDP, was way, way, way greater than the Roman GDP, which means that the Mauryan Empire, the army, would have had a significant advantage over the Romans. Yes, we are shown Rome, in popular media, in writing, in various TV serials and movies. We are Rome is portrayed as this enormous, massive, all-conquering empire. The truth is that it was nothing compared to the Mauryan Empire. It was not. The Mauryan Empire never sought to expand out of the Indian subcontinent. So it was a choice that the Mauryan emperors made. If they had chosen to expand and conquer other territories, they would have been able to do it reasonably easily. The Kushan Empire did conquer significant parts of Eurasia. The Kushan Empire's borders lay at the shores of the Caspian Sea and the Aral Sea. The Kushan Empire also included much of present day Xinjiang, which is currently occupied by China. That was an enormous empire. It was all done through conquest, military conquest, mainly by Kanishka the Great. So Indian empires certainly were capable of expanding if they so desired. And if a hypothetical war between Rome and the Mauryan Empire, let's say, had happened, the Mauryan Empire would most likely have prevailed and defeated the Roman Empire. That's an interesting question you've asked here, Rahul. Okay, let us see some other questions. Samarth says, why were Turkey and Hungary not invited to Biden's democracy summit, but Pakistan was invited? Pakistan rejected the invitation. See, I'm not quite sure what this democracy summit is all about. The US is not really a democracy. I mean, see what's happening. They are politically persecuting their own former president, Donald Trump. He is the first president in the entirety of US history to face criminal charges. So this is a clear example of political persecution of an opponent, of a political opponent. This is not something that happens in democracies. And the US is a two-party state, just one step above China or North Korea, which are one-party states. And obviously, it's now abundantly clear that the Pentagon has far more power than the White House. Clearly, Joe Biden is not running the country. The guy is not capable of running himself. And Kamala Harris, obviously, is, well, rather incompetent. So clearly, somebody else is running the nation. And that is the Pentagon, the defense establishment, which is the so called deep state. And so the US doesn't really believe in democracy. The US has been propping up dictatorships and autocracies across the world because it suits them. So democracy is just a stick to beat other nations with. So I am not sure what the agenda is. It's just to keep up appearances that we believe in democracy and we promote democracy and all that nonsense. India, I'm sure, has been invited. I'm sure India will go with it and play along. So I am not quite sure. I've not really looked into this matter, why certain nations were not invited. Turkey, as we know, is a part of NATO. Hungary, I believe, is reasonably closely aligned with the US to a certain extent. So I don't quite know why they did not invite Turkey and Hungary. Because maybe they believe that these two nations are already reasonably closely aligned with us. Perhaps maybe that could be the thinking process behind it. Perhaps Pakistan rejected the invitation because they are anyway not a democracy. So yeah, I don't know. All right. Tanush says, what are your personal thoughts about conservative speakers like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and what about LGBTQ plus Q, whatever, gay marriage in India? All right. Ben Shapiro is, like you say, a conservative speaker in the West. So is Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was, like, a few years ago, he was very, very outspoken about individual freedom and traditional values and all that. But now he has become very much aligned with the agenda of the state itself. So I don't take Jordan Peterson very seriously. If you watch some of his earlier videos, I'd seen a few earlier. It kind of made sense. Some of it was it kind of made sense. But some things have become very clear by now, that he is a Christian supremacist and a white supremacist. That's become very clear. He believes that the West is the greatest civilization that ever existed, and the West gave everything that's good to the world. And without the West, the world would be in darkness. And Christianity is the best thing out there, and all these things. So he's clearly a Christian supremacist and a white supremacist and a West supremacist. Yeah, Ben Shapiro, I don't really follow him. I haven't really paid a lot of attention to him. I think once again, when it comes to him, he obviously is Jewish, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, so as far as I have seen, his worldview is also very much Western supremacy and white supremacy. Obviously, there's a Jewish angle. Jews are not really white people. Their ancestors were not white people, so some of it that is also there. But I don't think these people are real role models for the world, or especially for anybody in India. Definitely not for India. What about LGBTQ plus? Well, it exists and let it exist. See, India has always been tolerant, and India has never ever persecuted LGBTQ people. We all know that a certain small, maybe 1 or 2% of the human population is like that. So let it be. Let them live their lives, live and let live. India has always been like that. Gay marriage. Listen, I believe in progress. I believe that we have to respect uh, individual rights. We have to respect individual choices. So if somebody is gay or LGBTQ or whatever it is, we respect that. Let them live their life. They're not hurting anybody. They're not harming anybody. Let them live their life in whatever way they feel is best for them. We also have to respect civilization and culture and tradition, right? We have to respect individual rights and liberty. We also have to respect every nation and every culture's traditions. We have to respect both things. There has to be a balance. Now, in India's civilization, which is at least 10,000 years old, have we ever had gay marriage? We haven't had that. So I would say that if gay people want to live together, let them live together. But there's no need for them to get, or maybe if they really seek marriage, we can have the court marriage or whatever. But and so I'm sure there's a lot of nuance and context to all that. I am absolutely in favor of giving them the same rights and the same respect as everybody else. When it comes to marriage, I think it's for the government to make a choice, but it's definitely something that Indian culture and tradition has not had. So gay people they never had the dharma vivaha or any such thing, right? It was never, it has never been part of our culture. So obviously culture is a living thing, tradition is a living thing. New cultural aspects emerge all the time, and new traditions are formed. But I would say that we have to respect what we have been doing in the past 10,000 years. And I think gay marriage was never part of Indian culture. Gay persecution and oppression has never been part of Indian history and culture. Never ever. We are the only culture that has never persecuted gay people or LGBTQ whatever people. But we also have never had gay marriage. So I think we need to find some kind of balance between these two things. I am absolutely in favor of allowing of giving the same rights and same respect to the gay people, LGBTQ people, as everybody else. But let's not break our culture and tradition for the sake of accommodating Western perspectives. That's what I would say. So listen, if gay marriage is indeed something that should happen, perhaps let it be the court marriage kind of thing, which would not have any religious angle or cultural angle. Perhaps that may, see, I have not really spent a lot of time thinking about this. I'm thinking in real time right now. So maybe we need to all come together, Indian society and culture and people need to come together and find some kind of consensus about this. The truth is that, you know, I'm not even sure what the statistics are. What percentage of the world is LGBTQ? Historically, it must have been 1 or 2%, but today this entire issue has been blown out of proportion. And everything in the US is a weird society. It is a sex obsessed society. Everything is about sex. M- m- your The most important component of your identity is your sexual orientation. Why? So we need to remember that we don't have to start taking you know cues from the West and start aping them. Maybe it's fine for them. Maybe it's the kind of society and religion and culture they have. It's all about, everything is revolves around sex. In India, it's never been like that. So we need to find our own way forward, our own path, and we need not allow them to arm twist us into changing our traditions and culture and society according to what they think is right, because that is what's called cultural imperialism. We don't have to, bend to these attempts to re-engineer Indian culture. Okay, let us see what are the questions. As I can see, there are lots of questions. Okay, Pakistan. Okay, have we taken any Pakistan questions? The question is, should India attack Pakistan and capture or safeguard its nuclear weapons? When the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan takes control of Pakistan, what will the world do in this case? I don't see the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan taking control of Pakistan. They can certainly create chaos, unleash chaos in Pakistan, but I don't see them being able to take over Pakistan. Uh, Obviously, like I have said in the past, I have nothing against the people of Pakistan. I wish them prosperity and happiness, and also their children and future generations. But Pakistan is a terrorist nation. It has to be dismantled. And then what needs to happen is that Pakistan needs to be broken up into its components. Balochistan should become free. Uh, Gilgit Baltistan, Jammu, and Pakistan occupied Kashmir should come back to India. The Shaksgam Valley, etc., should come back to India. The Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, Pashtunistan, should go back to Afghanistan. Sindh should become free, etc. That's what needs to happen. Now, obviously, the question then is, and this should happen hopefully peacefully without any war at all. I don't want India to waste its time getting into a war. There are other means of achieving what you want to achieve. The best way to win is to win without fighting. The most superior kind of victory is a victory that is achieved without firing a single shot. That is the best form of victory. So that is what India should go for. Attack. We don't want any attacks. We want to be at peace. We want to achieve our objectives very nicely without going to war, and that is certainly possible. Pakistan is always on the brink of implosion these days more than before. So I'm sure we can engineer something, hopefully peacefully, without going to war. Obviously, that raises the question as to what happens to the Pakistani nuclear weapons. So it is something that's going to be India's headache for sure. Obviously, the Indian government must be planning for such scenarios, like plan A, plan B, plan C, that sort of thing. Maybe the Americans may also get involved because possibly some of the Pakistani nuclear weapons could have some US components, perhaps, possibly, or some US technologies, perhaps. Most likely it's Chinese technology, but who knows? So if there is some US aspect in that, the Americans may want to secure those nukes before India does. So it's going to be a race against time when Pakistan implodes. So I obviously it makes sense that the Indian government must already have war gamed all the possible scenarios as to what happens when Pakistan implodes or breaks up, and it will be something that needs to be done as soon as possible to secure those nukes. So I don't care what the world does in that case. Pakistan is India's headache primarily. Secondary headache is for Afghanistan and Iran, but primarily it's India's headache. So it is, I think, going to be for India to act first, act very swiftly, and secure those nuclear weapons. Once the nukes are secured, the rest we can take care of in the due course of time. Is ISRO's new launch vehicle better than SpaceX? No. See, the most powerful. Currently, what does ISRO use? We have the PSLV, the Polar Space Launch Vehicle, which is a reasonably small rocket. We have an even smaller rocket, which is something that we're going to use for rapid launches, the SSSLV or something like that, small space satellite launch vehicle or something like that. And then we have the GSLV, which has a new name nowadays. It is the most powerful rocket that we have. The most powerful rocket that we have, the GSLV Mark 3 or whatever it's called these days, It is not comparable to the best SpaceX rockets, which are way more powerful. The Falcon rocket and the new Starship that will soon be tested, those are way more powerful than ISRO's launch vehicles. So, see, I am. It's pretty clear that we have excellent engineers and scientists, and if you give them the go ahead, they can also start building much more powerful rockets. We have the know-how, we have the technology, the motor, the engine that we use for the GSLV. All you have to do is take 10 of those, put them together, and build a bigger rocket out of that. It's as simple as that. Obviously, it's not as simple as I make it sound. It will entail some engineering challenges, but it's something that we can do. It's our engineers, what our engineers can definitely do. So it's a question of not getting the go ahead from the government. So I think the Indian government does not seem to have a lot of ambitions right now in the present day for ISRO. ISRO is being used as well. There's not a lot of new research that's being done. So ISRO is being used to launch foreign satellites and gain and earn some money. That's all. So it's not ideal. I would have hoped that India definitely in this century needs to become one of the top 2 or 3 spacefaring nations. That is essential, because the 2 or 3 nations that will lead the world in space exploration in this century are going to be the 2 or 3 nations that lead the world in everything. And all the other nations will be led and controlled by the top 2 or 3 nations. So India needs to be at the forefront of all these technologies, including space exploration. So right now it's not happening. We are still making do with the GSLV, which is not really a very powerful rocket. It's the biggest and most powerful rocket we have, but even the most powerful Chinese rockets are far more powerful than the GSLV. The French Ariane is way more powerful than the GSLV. Various, I believe, some Japanese rockets are more powerful than the GSLV, and the NASA rockets and SpaceX rockets are way more powerful than India's GSLV Mark III. So I think in 2-3 years, India can develop a rocket that's 10 times more powerful. Definitely in 2-3 years, we can do that. It's all about the government giving the go ahead and giving the permission for this to happen, and obviously allocating the funding. So these things are not happening right now. It's disappointing, but it's something that we can transform in 2-3 years if the government so decides. Right. Let's see what else we have. Um, let us see. Let us see. Lots of questions. Do we always have? Arman Singh says, if India gets the opportunity to join NATO, which in recent news we can hear, will India join it? Can it benefit us military wise? So we have to understand what the full scope of NATO is. NATO is a US led organization. It is owned by America. It is not portrayed in that manner, but it is an organization that is completely controlled by the US and completely owned by the US, because it is the Western European nations that make up NATO, and these are all American vassal states in one way or the other. The Turks are kind of on the border, on the boundary, kind of. They have a quasi independent foreign policy, but they also have US nuclear weapons on their territory, which is controlled by the Americans, obviously. The French also have a kind of quasi independent foreign policy, but they are in no position to not accede to the core demands of the US. So NATO is all about being controlled by the Americans. Okay. And all of these nations, their militaries come under the NATO command. Now the top NATO commander at certain point in time may be a non-American, but overall it's under US control. So if India joins NATO, hypothetically, India will have to agree to put India's military under NATO command. Do you think that will be acceptable to any Indian person or to the Indian government? Impossible. And there are other things that you have to agree to, political things as well. Your nuclear weapons may come under NATO command, and so on. For instance, well, nuclear weapons may not technically come under NATO control. The French have a completely independent set of nukes. Their nuclear weapons are deployed on nuclear submarines, which are always on patrol. So that's what gives France their nuclear deterrent, the second strike capability. The UK's nuclear weapons are essentially under US control. The UK has nuclear submarines, but the nuclear weapons, the warheads, are placed on top of American missiles. And I am 99.99999% sure that the red button, the launch button, is not in Mr. Rishi Sunak's hands. It's most likely in the Pentagon's hands. So, uh, so there's a lot of compromises that you have to make if you become a part of NATO. Your military comes under NATO command, and there will be other things also which may be hidden. Secret, uh, certain secret set of conditions that you may have to agree to. So, so I don't think India should become a part of NATO. I don't think India will become a part of NATO. India will cooperate with NATO and the US on certain specific issues. In those issues that are beneficial to India's national interest. India will not become part of NATO as far as I can see, ever. India is part of the Quad, which is not a military alliance officially. India also engages with various other nations in military cooperation. So I don't see NATO benefiting India military wise. It may actually compromise India from the military perspective, because India may have to put its armed forces under NATO command, which essentially means US command. So if India gets the opportunity, India should say no. India should say that we will certainly cooperate with you. We will extend our cooperation to you based on what issue it is about, issue based cooperation. But we will not become a part of NATO and subordinate our army and military to your command. That won't happen. Dr. Jaishankar's supremacy says, don't you get pissed off by seeing the West is now interfering in our internal politics so much after Rahul Gandhi is being disqualified and will not stand against Modi ji in 2024 and 2029? The West has been interfering in the entire world's internal matters, politics, for decades. It's nothing new in India. Let's talk about hypotheticals over here. There are various nations in which entire political parties have been created, which are funded by the West. Okay? I am not talking about India only over here, because I don't want people to say that I'm pointing fingers at a certain political party. But in various nations, it's happened that suddenly some movement comes up and a bunch of new political leaders come up who come out of nowhere, and a new political party is formed, and it is closely linked with foreign funding. Such things may or may not have happened, perhaps in India also. So this is something that is a long-standing policy of the West, and they also use NGOs to affect to interfere in the internal matters of nations. In India, we have more NGOs than schools and hospitals, and lots of these NGOs receive money from the West and maybe from other places as well. So that is another avenue of interfering in the internal matters and politics of various nations. So this is something everyone. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but the people who matter in the government definitely know this, and I'm sure they are keeping a very close watch, more than we realize, on all these activities. So listen, in geopolitics, emotions don't play a role. So yeah, you may get angry or pissed off, but that really doesn't make any difference. What needs to happen is that the government needs to find effective ways of countering these attempts to interfere in the internal matters of our nation. And you can't counter all of them thus far. You can do it only when you are powerful enough. So before 2010, there was a lot of US interference in China as well. Lots of Chinese Communist Party officials were compromised, if you understand the meaning of compromised. Then after Mr. Xi Jinping came to power, those Western agents in the Chinese Communist Party were dealt with very harshly, if you know what I mean. So when you rise to a certain level of power and you become powerful enough, you can take stronger measures to clean up the internal system and to deal with those who are agents of foreign powers who are acting against the national interest of your nation. So it will happen in due time. Right now, India is not that powerful. India is a 3.5 or so trillion dollar economy. We need to first reach $10 trillion of the $10 trillion mark. Once we reach that, we're going to be way more powerful and we'll be able to push back harder against Western interference in India and other interference as well. It's not just the West that's interfering, other powers, including China, will also be interfering in India's politics. So it's just a fact of life. There's no point getting pissed off, either me or the government. It's all about the government taking the right steps. And I'm sure those steps are being taken. But they will not be publicized, obviously. It's not for us to know. These things are kept secret so that no one knows about it. All right, let's take one or two more questions. My views on India building a satellite city in Vladivostok. So India has, I think, said or proposed to build a satellite city or something like that in the far east of Russia. Do we know where Vladivostok is? It's right north of North Korea. So you go to the far east. You know where India is, right? So let's go eastwards, eastwards, eastwards. We know where South Korea is. And then you have North Korea. And north of North Korea, we have Vladivostok, the great port of Vladivostok in the Russian Far East, which is just a few kilometers from North Korea. If you see the distance from there, Vladivostok to North Korea, the border, it is about 132 kilometers, 130 kilometers roughly, not really far away at all. So Russia will definitely welcome any kind of investment activities from India because India is in no way a threat for Russia, and India and Russia have an excellent relationship, a very fruitful and warm relationship. And Russia has also already said in just a couple of days ago that it wants to strengthen that relationship with India further. India and China are the two nations Russia wants to work the most closely with. So if India has proposed building a city of some kind, a satellite city or whatever it is in this region, the Russians will definitely welcome it very much. And obviously, if India is doing it, it will also benefit India in some way. So it will maybe be an Indian outpost that serves Russia and India as well from the perspective of trade and other things, whatever they are. So I think it's good. I think India should do that. Hopefully it will benefit India also substantially and Russia as well. So it's called a win-win relationship. So I think it's a great thing. And I'm glad to see India being more proactive now. For about 2 decades, there was this policy of look east. Well, looking is a passive thing. You can keep looking all day. It will not change the world. But act east is acting. When you act, you actually start changing the world. So India seems to be now actually acting east. Recently, India has sold BrahMos missiles to, which nation was it? The Philippines. And India may be selling, sorry, it was Vietnam. Was it Philippines? Philippines, most likely. So that is acting east. India is actually acting there. India may also sell these BrahMos missiles to other nations in the Champa Sea, South China Sea region, which is again very strong action. And if India builds a port or a satellite city near Vladivostok, it's going to be something that benefits India as well and Russia as well. So it's good. So India is now finally beginning to get its act together, and India is now acting. India is now acting east, which is great to see. So I think it's a very good and positive and good development, something that we should welcome very much. Rajat says, what is the scope of blockchain technology? Is a career in it worth pursuing? See, blockchain is the decentralized internet. It's blockchain technology. The scope is I think it's great. So we all know about cryptocurrency, we know all know about Bitcoin, right? All of this is built on top of the blockchain. The blockchain is something that cannot be, it is completely decentralized. It's not owned by anybody, it's not owned by any government. So if you have assets on the blockchain, those are not going to be cut off by, or censored by the government. If you have a genuine cryptocurrency that is truly decentralized, like Bitcoin for instance, then it's not controlled by any government. So let's say you have a million, okay, let's say hypothetically you have $1 million in a bank in the US, and the US can cut off your access to it. So if they close or freeze your bank account, then there's nothing you can do about it, and you lose all the money. But if you have the same amount of money in Bitcoin on the blockchain, then no government can cut off your access to it, and you can use it in transactions, for transactions worldwide. So blockchain, that's just one example of that. Then you have non-fungible tokens, uh, NFTs, which kind of are a fad right now, but eventually they will have a lot of real world utility. So there's a lot of development that will happen in that as well. I think blockchain could, and eventually you will have digital currencies. You have something called Ethereum, which is not really decentralized because it is all owned by one company or it's in one place. It's not truly decentralized. But I think blockchain has a huge amount of potential. It is essentially permissionless, and it is truly decentralized. Nobody actually owns it, and a lot of development can be done on top of that. You can have entire websites, entire tokens. You can have agreements that are uh, that can live on the blockchain. I think there's a lot of scope in that. I think it's not really been exploited a lot thus far. So I think it's a career that is definitely worth pursuing. Most likely, it's not a fad. Cryptocurrencies have come and gone. 2 years ago, everybody was into crypto. Then the Bitcoin crashed and all that. But I think the concept is an excellent concept. The blockchain concept is also an excellent concept. I think it is something that will most likely stand the test of time. So there are times when interest is high and there are times when interest is low. But if something is going to withstand the test of time, then even if interest may be low right now, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, it's going to be very valuable. I think blockchain is something that will be here to stay. It is Web 3.0, the next iteration, the decentralized web. So I think it is a career definitely that's worth pursuing. Okay, I think we will take one more question and then we'll be done. We've already crossed way past 2 hours. Um, Michelle says, though you didn't pick my question, thanks for answering another one on the same topic. Okay, I'm not sure. I have so many questions here, but anyway, I'm glad I answered the question on the same topic. Um, when will I contest in KBC? Yes, I want 1 crore rupees. I will contest. Shall I? 1 crore rupees. Okay, let's take one more question. Akash says, if you eat, do you eat 1 meal a day? Yes, these days I'm eating 1 meal a day. That's ideally what I want to keep on doing, 1 meal a day. See, typically, if you are a reasonably less active person, like everybody else is these days, then you need approximately 2,000 calories in one day. And it's definitely possible to eat that in one meal, especially if you're a big person. So I prefer to eat 1 meal a day, just 1 meal, and be done with it. And the rest of the day, you're free. You don't have to think about food. It's called 1 meal a day OMAD. Now I'm not always able to stick to that. But that's something I prefer to do. What I don't have any specific recipes. What I do is I need a certain amount of protein per day that will come from a protein source, and the rest of it is just lightly fried vegetables, lots of vegetables, or a soup with vegetables. So most of the calories will come from the protein and the fat in the protein source. An example is paneer. Yeah. So if you want, and sometimes I take whey protein if I'm working out regularly. So I want about 100 to 150 grams of protein, something in between that per day, and the rest of the calories come from roasted vegetables or stir fried vegetables or something, which will be stir fried typically in ghee. So that's what I do. There is no specific recipe. I think it's a great lifestyle to have. You get all your calories from just one meal. The body adapts to that. It's not going to have any bad effects, and it kind of keeps your glucose level and all that, the insulin levels and all that down. It gives you mental clarity. Fasting also helps. I've done fasts in the past, like significant fasts, scary fasts, all that. So yeah, go ahead and do that Omar thing, and all the best with it. So with that, we are done with today's session. 2 hours 10 minutes. Thank you very much for all the questions. Tomorrow we will have the next episode of the Ask Abhijit show, in which I will take questions from the comments that you have put in various parts of the YouTube channel. So thank you very much, and I will see you very soon in less than 24 hours time. Until then, take care. Good night.